You know that sound, right? You stand up and your knee sounds just like someone's popping bubble wrap. Or you roll your shoulder and you hear that distinct click. Our bodies are full of all these strange sounds, but those pops, cracks, and crunches coming from our joints, they're some of the most common and, let's be honest, sometimes the most worrying. So today we're going to crack open this medical mystery and find out what is really going on inside our joints.
So this is the big question we're tackling. Is that noise just a harmless little quirk of your body's mechanics, something you can just ignore? Or is it an early warning signal, a whisper from your joints telling you that something isn't quite right? We hear these sounds all the time, but most of us have absolutely no idea what they actually mean.
Okay, so let's get into this with the proper terminology. In the medical world, this whole phenomenon actually has a name: crepitus. I know, it sounds a little intimidating, but it's really just the official term for any of those grinding, crackling, or popping sensations we feel and hear. And hey, knowing the name is the very first step to understanding the cause.
Now for the good news. And this is really good news. Most of the time, crepitus is completely and totally harmless. So what's happening? Well, air, specifically gases like nitrogen, can kind of seep into the soft tissues and that all-important synovial fluid that lubricates your joints. When you bend or stretch, you change the pressure inside that joint really fast, and pop! Those little gas bubbles burst. It's basically the exact same reason your knuckles crack.
This is the crucial turning point. A noisy joint is one thing, but a noisy joint that also hurts, well, that is sending a very, very different message. See, pain is your body's alarm system, and when you pair it with crepitus, it's a signal we absolutely should not ignore. This is when a simple noise becomes a real symptom, one that definitely needs a closer look.
So if pain's in the picture, we start looking for the underlying causes. And in the world of arthritis, there are two main suspects that work in completely different ways. One is a really slow process of mechanical wear and tear, over a lifetime. And the other? Well, that's a case of mistaken identity, where your body's own defense system basically becomes the attacker. On the surface, osteoarthritis, or OA, and rheumatoid arthritis, RA, can seem pretty similar. I mean, they both cause joint pain, stiffness, the usual suspects. But deep down, at their core, they are fundamentally different. OA is what we call a degenerative wear and tear condition. It's where that protective cartilage in your joints just breaks down over time. RA, on the other hand, is an autoimmune disorder. That's where your own immune system gets confused and mistakenly attacks the lining of your joints. Okay, let's dive into this table because it lays out the differences so clearly. First, look at the cause. OA is straight-up mechanical wear. RA is an autoimmune attack. Big difference. Now, under symptoms, you'll see that, both cause pain, but RA is systemic. That means it can come with fatigue, a fever, it can even affect your internal organs. For onset, OA tends to develop slowly, creeping up over years, but RA, it can advance really, really fast. And here's a huge clue. With affected joints, OA often starts in just a single weight-bearing joint, like one knee, but RA is typically symmetrical, so it affects both hands or both wrists at the same time. And just to give you a sense of scale here, osteoarthritis is not some rare condition. We're talking more than 31 million Americans living with it. That makes it the most common form of arthritis by a long, long shot. So this isn't some obscure disease. It's a major public health issue that affects the mobility and quality of life for a huge number of people.
And this is exactly why telling them apart is so critical. As Dr. David Fox points out, getting the diagnosis right matters a lot. Especially with rheumatoid arthritis. Because it's an autoimmune disease, there are very specific treatments that can suppress that immune response, and they can potentially put the disease into remission and prevent permanent joint damage. So early and accurate diagnosis is absolutely key.
All right, let's zoom in now. Let's get a much better look at the joint itself, the scene of the crime, if you will. To really get what's going wrong with conditions like arthritis, we first need to understand the parts that are supposed to make everything work nice and smoothly. This is the incredible biological machinery that lets us move.
First up, we've got the synovial fluid. Honestly, the best way to think about this stuff is like the engine oil in your car. It's this thick, kind of slimy fluid that fills up the joint cavity, and its whole job is to reduce friction between the bones and cartilage every single time you move. Without enough high-quality synovial fluid, things, they start to grind.
Next, we have cartilage. This is that smooth, rubbery tissue that covers the ends of your bones. Think of it as your joint's own personal shock absorber, a built-in cushion. Now, what's so important to remember is that in osteoarthritis,
this is the exact tissue that starts to wear away.
Now, check this out. This is a really fascinating fact right here. That incredibly important cartilage tissue, it's made of about 80% water. It basically acts like a sponge. This super high water content is exactly what gives it its springiness, its shock-absorbing power, but it also reveals a major vulnerability.
So here's the crucial point. If your cartilage is 80% water, what do you think happens when you're dehydrated? Well, that cartilage can't hold on to water it doesn't have. It starts to lose its plumpness and it becomes more brittle, less effective as a cushion. Being chronically dehydrated can actually accelerate that wear and tear process, making your joints way more susceptible to damage.
So it turns out, joint health isn't just about what's happening in the joint. There are other factors, some of them are actually pretty surprising, that can play the role of an accomplice, influencing your symptoms and how you actually experience pain. The picture is way more complex than just simple mechanics.
Let's start with vitamin D. We all know it's vital for bone health because it helps us regulate calcium. But get this, research also suggests it has anti-inflammatory effects. Now, the jury's still out on a definitive link, but some studies show that people with inflammatory arthritis, like RA, very often have low vitamin D levels. So getting enough from sunlight or through your diet with foods like salmon, tuna, and mushrooms is a really smart strategy for your overall musculoskeletal health.
Now, here's something you probably have never even considered. A study published in PubMed Central looked at workers in an automobile manufacturing plant, and they found a pretty startling connection. Chronic exposure to low-frequency noise, that constant hum and rumble of machinery, was linked to a heightened perception of pain in their muscles and joints. So let's look at what the study actually found on this chart. You can see the average pain scores that were reported by the two different groups. The noise-exposed group, that's the first bar, reported a significantly higher pain score than the group that wasn't exposed to all that chronic noise. And what's more, they also reported higher levels of anxiety and depression.
Okay, so let's be super clear about this. The research is not saying that the noise is physically damaging the cartilage or the bone. That's not what's happening. Instead, it seems to be working on the central nervous system. The chronic stress from all that noise can raise stress hormones like cortisol and basically make the brain's pain processing centers more sensitive. So it doesn't cause the arthritis, but it can definitely amplify the pain you're already feeling.
All right, let's move into our final section and see how all of this builds into a practical toolkit. Knowing the causes and the contributing factors is one thing, but what can you actually do about it? What can you do to manage joint pain and protect your joints for the long haul? Well, there are several straightforward, actionable strategies we can talk about. For those acute flare-ups of pain and swelling, the classic RICE method is your first line of defense. It's an acronym and it stands for rest, to avoid any more strain, ice, to reduce inflammation and numb the area, compression, using a bandage to give support and limit the swelling, and elevation, which means raising the joint above your heart to help drain away fluid. It's a simple but really effective home remedy. And going back to just how important water is for your cartilage, your hydration strategy is absolutely key. The goal isn't just to drink water when you're thirsty. You should aim for a consistent intake of 8 to 10 cups every single day. And you can also boost your hydration with electrolyte-rich fluids because they help your cells hold on to water, and by eating foods with high water content like cucumbers, celery, and watermelon. And let's not forget about some key minerals. Calcium is the foundational building block for your bones, and it also plays a role in cartilage integrity. Magnesium is also crucial. It helps with muscle function and relaxation. See, when the muscles around a painful joint are all tight and tense, it can put extra strain on that joint. So getting enough magnesium can really help provide some relief. So, in the end, that pop in your knee or that crackle in your shoulder isn't just some random noise. It's a form of communication. Most of the time, sure, it's just a harmless whisper. But sometimes, especially when it's paired with pain, it's a very clear signal that deserves your attention. So the real question is, are you listening to what your body is trying to tell you?